What's up, guys? Welcome back to AutoTechNick. Today we're out in the shop with a little side project. As I was working on it, I realized I have some good tips and pointers that I wanted to share with you guys. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so what we have going on is I'm installing a aftermarket remote start in a car, and I'm not going to cover the installation of that because that's pretty universal, but there's something specific to the wiring that I wanted to cover. So you can see I have everything laid out on the bench, and it's pretty standard for any aftermarket device you're installing into a car, whether it be a remote start in this case, or an aftermarket radar detector, keyless entry, alarm, radio. It pretty much all comes with the same thing. And a lot of these are made to fit more than one application, and is what you wind up with is these connectors with a big bundle of wiring. Now, if I were to use all this wiring on the install, that's fine. But as you can see here on this instruction, I'm only using maybe 1/3 of the wires here. I think there's 20 pins on that connector, and I'm using about 8 or 9. So if we're not going to be utilizing all the wires in this connector, that leaves the question, what are we going to be doing with the wires that we don't use? Now, a lot of times I see people just leave them in there. They'll either run it with the existing wiring or they'll bundle them up, and it just ends up having a very messy, cluttered installation, and it looks terrible. So I've also seen where people go and will just cut the wire off at the connector and leave them there, and I don't like doing that because A, it doesn't look very good, and also you leave an open end of the wire there, and again, there's just a better way to go about it. So is what I found myself doing over the years is I will actually go and de-pin the wires that I'm not going to use on the connector and just remove them completely. Now by doing that, it's going to allow me, if I make a mistake or if I need a different wire, I can put them back in, because these wires are held in with just a small little retaining spring on the connector. So what I'm going to do is I need to go ahead and look at the wire diagram, find which wires by the wire colors that I need to use, and I'll go ahead and show you how you pop these out. Now, one thing to note on these when you're popping these out on these connectors, some OEM connectors have different types of locks to go ahead and pop out the wires. Now, from my experience on most all the aftermarket items I've found, they're generally very simple locks, and they're usually on the metal pin side, not the plastic connector, so it's a lot easier to pop them out. There is a few instances where it is on the plastic part. If you just spend a little time studying the connector, you usually can look and decipher how they pop out, and it's generally not too difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and set the camera down, and I'll show you on this one what I'm going to do to get them out. One thing I did not mention is most the time on these aftermarket connectors, I'd say probably 99% of the time, you do not need a specific pin remover tool to get these out. You usually can do it with just a straight little hook, and you can pop them out. So it's usually the OEM connectors where you need the specific tools, but nowadays you can buy a universal pin removal kit on Amazon very cheaply. So even if you need the special tools, it's not that bad to go ahead and invest and get what you need to take them out. So what I'm going to do in my case here is I'm looking at my wire diagram, and I can match up what colors I have and which wires I need to take out. And once I establish which wire that needs to come out, I will just go ahead and I'll hold the wire and take my pick, and I just apply a little pressure. I'll do it on one you can see here. I just gently apply a little pressure on that tab that holds it in, and you can just go ahead and pop out that wire. So you can see there's no damage, no cutting, and if you look right here very carefully, you can see that hook right on the top, right there. That's what locks it in. So you just have to push that down a little bit and pull it out. Now, I need this wire, so I can just go ahead and slide it back in, and it's locked in. So you can see what I have right here is what I'm going to do is go ahead and pop the rest of these out and only have the wires that I need, and I'll show you what we end up with. So you can see originally this connector had 20 terminals in it with 20 wires. I only needed 7 as per my wire diagram. So you can see once I removed all 13 of those, much cleaner, much less mess up under the dash. Like I said, anytime you're doing anything electrical and you have extra wires, just go ahead and de-pin them, save these, you never know when they come in handy, and clean up your installation. All right, Now that we talked about how to get your wires in, take the pins out of the connectors and clean everything up, let's talk about making your connections. Now I think all of us have gone ahead and used butt connectors to make our connections, and I can tell you that over the years I've moved away from those because they have been very problematic for me, and I now just go ahead and solder all my connections. Now if you guys aren't able to solder, whether you don't have the equipment or tools, these butt connectors are still a good option to use, but there's ways to use them and make them better than what we have. So you can see here with this butt connector, I just took it out of the package and I crimped it on with a pair of typical crimpers right here, and this is the usual product that you get. Now I've found with these a lot of times the crimp isn't very good and the wires can pull out, and I also found that when you go ahead and crimp on the sleeve sometimes, the sleeve will go and actually push the metal barrel inside the connector and you have a bad connection. So one alternative, which I use if I can't solder, is you can get these bare metal barrels and you can crimp those on. Now, if you can't find these, is what you can do is you can go ahead and take these existing connectors that you get at your auto parts store, and you can actually cut this plastic off with just a razor blade. So you can see that I went ahead and just ran a slit down this hard plastic, and essentially is what you have inside is the standard barrel connector. So by doing this, you eliminate the problem of these sliding around, plus I find these to be very unsightly. And you can go ahead and crimp that barrel connector onto the wire. Now, is what I do after I crimp that on is I'll come back and I use a normal piece of heat shrink and I'll shrink it on, and you'll see that it makes a dramatic difference in the look of the connection that you can make. There is one more thing though. Again, I've had a lot of bad connections with these, even on the barrels by themselves without the insulation. So I've moved on and I have a ratcheting crimper set. And these work really well because they just don't squish that barrel on two sides like these pliers do. These will go ahead and crimp them and compress them, and you get a much tighter connection, and it's more compact and uniform. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the camera down, crimp this on, heat shrink it, and I'll show you the difference. So you can see that it's a much better repair. I didn't do a good job getting the heat shrink centered, but you can see that it wraps up a lot tighter. It's a lot smaller in diameter as opposed to a normal butt connector, and it doesn't really take much longer at all to go about it this way versus using a standard butt connector. So I found that when you're installing something and you have several of these to make, when you start adding all these butt connectors near each other, it gets pretty ugly and crude, and when you go about this route, it looks a lot cleaner. So it's just a quick little tip that I've learned over the years and something that you guys might like. Now one more thing, you notice in the box of stuff it comes with to install this, it has a Scotch lock. If you notice in my kit, there's no Scotch locks in there. I can tell you that over the years working in the dealerships, I stay away from Scotch locks at all costs. I've learned that they're nothing but problems. I've found that if these metal contacts in here, where the wire goes, if they're too tight, it'll actually cut the wire. I found that they loosen up over time and have an intermittent connection. I have pulled more of these out that were causing problems in cars than they've ever been helpful. So these are something that I do not use. I would only use these if I'm broken down on the side of the road and it's my only option, but I still would honestly rather cut the wire insulation back and just wrap the wire around it than use a Scotch lock. I do not like these one bit. I highly recommend that you stay away from them. Alright guys, I grabbed the camera and I wanted to show you this finished installation of this remote start. Just because it's aftermarket doesn't mean it needs to be ugly on the install. So you can see that I had a cavity here back behind this wiring. See if I can get the camera up there. And that's where I place the remote start. And one thing that I do differently when I wire stuff is I find the location for the item and I run the wires from the remote start module to the rest of the car. So I actually have that module back there. I have wires that run up to the A pillar, my ground wires here on this bracket. I splice into this connector up here. I splice in the wires down on the OBD2 connector over here. I even have wires up to my light switch and obviously to my ignition harness. And all the lock wires are back here into this big bundle that go into the door jamb. Now if you notice, it blends completely in. There's no excess wire. I have no bundles of wire. The wires are all the right length because I started at the module, routed up, and then terminated them where they need to be connected. So in the end, it's a much cleaner installation. Very hard to tell that it's there. It's not intrusive to the factory harness. I can still service things if I need to, and it's just a little bit of extra time to install it, but in the end, a much nicer installation. A lot of times I find on these aftermarket devices, they're only as good as the install. Take a little bit of time, make it look nice, install it right, and it's much better in the end. So that's all for this video, guys. As always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch the channel. I hope these tips will help you out on your projects. If you have some tips of your own, drop them in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say. If you guys like the video, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Thank you for watching.